partnership strategy. He was previously the Chief Product and Marketing Officer for GE Digital, where he was responsible for the overall product portfolio and marketing strategy. Prior to GE Digital, he held senior leadership roles at Hewlett-Packard, Vertica, and Adobe Capital Partners. He splits his time between Silicon Valley and Chicago and currently serves on the board of bizworld.org and is an advisor to Actian Corporation. All right, next we have Veronica. She is the CTO of TangoCode. She is which is a Chicago-based tech firm. As a woman in the tech sector, Veronica considers it essential to not only create a diverse and progressive culture within her own company, but also promote it within the tech community. TangoCode is the subject matter expert at accelerating the creation of new products that make digital media companies more competitive, efficient, and provide better value to their clients. Prior to starting TangoCode, Veronica was a co-founder of Genexus USA, a development services firm for automation platforms, workflows, and automation code generation solutions for enterprises working in more than 50 mission-critical projects along her career, automating distribution centers, PO solutions, workflow enablement, and more. And last, we have Alex, the VP of Growth at Grubhub. Alex is the Vice President at Grubhub, responsible for customer acquisition and retention for the nation's leading online food ordering and delivery platform. Alex's team drives the growth of Grubhub's diner base and engagement with the platform via online and offline media channels using marketing and product techniques that bring together art and science. Prior to joining Grubhub, Alex was the Director of Marketing Technologies at eBay, leading personalization and CRM efforts and marketing. Before eBay, Alex led the product development team at WebPaint, a machine learning startup in the social media space, co-founded an employment marketplace startup, and held product development leadership roles at Microsoft. Okay, please everybody welcome our panelists. Okay, so tonight we're going to be talking about Chicago and the Midwest and how it can be competitive and how it can drive talent in the tech economy across the nation. Okay, so just a little bit about Chicago. It's the third largest city in the country and home to some of the best universities providing great tech talent, yet we are consistently losing talent to the coast and regularly ranked towards the back end of the top 10 for tech hubs in the country. So we're going to explore how we got to the position we're currently in, what has gone right, what has gone wrong, and what are the visions for the roadmap to make Chicago a top 3 thriving and inclusive city for technology and innovation. So I think the first point that we want to get to is on the subject of talent. All right, and I know running companies, you guys are facing this issue a lot. So I want to hit on just what are the challenges with keeping talent in the Midwest, particularly in Chicago, and what are the challenges of attracting new talent to the Midwest. So if anybody wants to jump in first, otherwise I'm just going to call on Jay.
You want to go first? Okay. So thanks for being here. Thanks for hosting. For those of you who don't know what Uptake does, we're a AI and machine learning platform for the industrial world, helping large equipment to not fail. Effectively to help keep the machinery that we all depend on day in and day out to work. So a fact here, so I split my time between Silicon Valley and Chicago. I've been in Chicago for a better part of the last year, and I'm actually humbled to be here for a couple of reasons, which gets to the question around talent. There's a vibrancy that I have seen amongst Chicago tech and team members and individuals about the pride of what they're working in. And I'll put this analogy out there, and this might actually prevent me from getting back on a plane back to Silicon Valley, but so be it. I always kind of joke, having grown up in the Bay Area, that yes, a lot of innovation, great things, but when I started to make the transition into the industrial space, and particularly into Uptake, it's about purpose. What is it that you're working on that fundamentally makes an impact to the way we live, the way we work, and the way that we communicate and operate with one another? And when I thought about that intently, I said, geez, you know, I can build software for any industry and be engaged in that. But there's been a fundamental purpose. And when I think of Uptake, which will be no different than my colleagues here in terms of conversation, we're in America's heartland. If we want to look at industrial equipment, you come here. When you understand it and understand what has actually motivated and driven much of the US economy, it's here. So when I think about this, and I'll put a jab, and I've done this to my counterparts, is that it's great that they built awesome technology on the West Coast, but what do you actually do with the data? And so I'm finding a big theme here that there's a lot of tech companies that are really data-driven, data-focused to say, how do I actually change the way that we work because I have the insights, because I have the access to the data. Thank you, West Coast, for helping to build scalable platforms that allow us to access the data, but fundamentally, what is the outcome? So I think, in a long-winded way of saying, there's really one is purpose that I've seen, is being mindful of the type of companies that are being built, that people want to engage in because it emotionally connects to them and something they feel that they can have an identity with. That's an important one. And I think too, certainly the vibrancy of the environment. I have found, Chicago itself as a city has been very accepting, and just the accessibility to transit, to technology companies, VCs that are in the area, and the ability to have engagements like this, being able to do that in walking distance or quick driving distance. So these are just a couple of things. I can't say this too much of how we're losing out to the different coasts, because I'm giving that perspective of coming in. Maybe I'll leave that for you guys.
Yeah, one of the things. Oops. There you go. No, one of the things that I can jump in is like, when we look at recruiting talent, and we always in relation to my participants here, we're a smaller company, and when we look at talent and how to keep talent and how we compete, we always are very mindful about the industry that we're in, right? So we're in a low unemployment in our tech industry. And what it means to that is people are looking to other things. So it's not so much about anymore like getting a job, but it is the fulfillment of the job, which is part of what you're talking about. And when we look at surveys, there's a recent survey with 24,000 developers participating in Stack Flow, and they were pointing about where were their top motivators. And number one, yes, it benefits and the compensation. But number two was about culture and about the environment. So one of the things that we try to do a lot of in TangoCode, and we work really hard at that. But I think it's something that we do. We have a great opportunity here in the Midwest, and we might not be taking as much opportunity as we can about being able to push the type of cultures that are in the companies about diversity, about the inclusion that you feel in the city, as you were mentioning, and they are in the companies, because it is about not only the type of compensation and benefits that they have, but when you can actually choose, it's also about the fulfillment, about the workspace and the environment, and the type of people that you're going to be working with, and the acceptance that you get around it. So there, I think we should work harder in promoting the diverse cultures that we can get, and that they're fun cultures. I love the Pac-Man desk that I saw there, and the fun cultures, and then together with the diversity and inclusion that we can get. I think there we should be able to promote better about what Chicago is all about, or Midwest, from that perspective of talent.
Yeah. I lived in Seattle for 15 years before coming here 2 years ago, and I hired a bunch of engineers there, and I hired a bunch of engineers here, and there's this recurring theme that comes back, and that theme is that culture will beat strategy 10 times out of 10, and you can't create a culture out of mercenaries. And more on the West Coast, I have found that whenever we're competing for talent, that candidate has 5 offers from 5 companies that really have nothing in common, other than their top tech firms. And then the question comes, do they want to be there, or do they want to go to the highest bidder? And then when you add to that the average tenures of employees that are becoming smaller and smaller, and in the Bay Area for an engineer it's less than a year, how can you build culture out of that? And what I've seen here is, of course, the pedigrees of engineers that are applying. Perhaps they haven't worked at Google, but they know why they want to work at Grubhub. And they are choosing the job, and as such, they contribute not just their skill, they contribute their heart. And from that, you can build a culture, and you can retain employees better, and you can have folks who are dramatically more engaged. So even though perhaps there's not an anchor of an Amazon or a Facebook or a Google that the West Coast enjoys, the type of talent that's here wants to be here. And there's something magical about that.
So all three of you kind of were on a similar theme. And it wasn't, we have more money and we have more dollars to offer new hires. That's something that's really easy to show people on an offer letter, especially people that aren't from here. How do we use the strengths that you mentioned of culture, kind of having a little more purpose, a little more tenure at a company? How do we showcase that? How do we get the most out of that? That's one of our biggest edges when hiring, when attracting people to come here. Just jump in wherever. It doesn't have to be just down the line. Unless Jay has the best thing to say.
I don't know if I do.
All right, well, I can start with one. So one thing I can explain maybe in some of the interviewing process that I had, in particular at Uptake, that I found to be very different. It was a sense of, let's get to know you, let's not interview you. And what I mean by that is, you make an assumption that there's aptitude, and there's skill, and there's capability. I don't know if that was for my case, but let's just make that for the sake of the argument, right? Mm-hmm. But the point there was, it's how you're going to work with your team members. Is that cultural fit real? In the sense that you're going to help to take it to the next level and not be disruptive to where it has been. That, to me, is one of the biggest and most important things at any point of a scaling company, because you make those jumps and you start to see new folks coming in, and all of a sudden the current folks are like, geez, that doesn't work for me. And then they go, hey, I'm out of here. As opposed to spending the time to really understand, what are you going to do? What, as we talked earlier, what are you going to give into the environment and the way the company works to help take it to the next level, but appreciating where it has been. And so I think in that sense, it's a lot of helping to understand how individuals work, how they understand what really motivates them, what drives them. The skill and the aptitude absolutely, obviously, are a cornerstone, but that to me was one thing that was very unique. And I think helped immediately make me feel accepted day one. So you get out of the way this, okay, I gotta take 30 days, 60 days, 90 days just to get to know people around the office. You hit the ground running. So I thought that was very, very unique.
Yeah, and absolutely, I was going to point out about the hiring process. So where do you show that? It's working your hiring process. So for us, we work really hard in our hiring process. We put our top people. Hiring is one of our most important activities, right? Because you're bringing in TangoCode, we said we're bringing members of our family, right? So you're not going to bring anybody right to your family. It's a very, very important activity, and we take it really seriously, and we work really hard in our hiring process. We work hard in our hiring processes to be sure that they support the values that we represent, to be sure that, for example, one of the interviews, culture fit, and like I'm the CTO of the company, normally I would take part of that interview because for me it's super important, the culture fit. And the main thing I always, we always highlight is it's very important for the person that is coming to work with us to understand if we are a good fit for them. So it's not only about them being a good fit for us, but are we a good fit for you? Because we are going to be a place where you're going to develop, where you are going to, you're putting yourself in us, you're trusting us to develop your career. to develop you as a person. And when you leave or you do different things or you grow, you're going to be a different person because of the experience with us. So we take that very seriously, and what we can tell is people, you can tell authenticity. That's something that there's nothing that you can, when you take that seriously in your hiring process, people can tell. It's something that, totally recommend.
I think that's quite beautiful. The way we try to get folks to be authentic in the process is by first and foremost wearing our hearts on our sleeves and showing these values to allow them to kind of step up to the occasion and open up as well, right? And let me give you some examples about this, right? We obsess over ideas of experimentation and intellectual honesty and being wrong. And we proudly speak about the times when we tried something and we were wrong. And that usually takes people back. They're like, oh my God, there's this senior person telling me about all of his mistakes in the past 6 months. What's going on? And usually folks that have a similar culture, they're actually attracted to it. And in a big way, this wearing of our hearts on our sleeves and saying that this job is not for everyone. This value system is not for everyone. This culture is like this, and if you want to be like this, we welcome you very much. And the aspects are around experimentation and intellectual honesty when you're experimenting, and high velocity, and thinking as a startup, even though you're selling billions of dollars worth of product, if that's for you, this is us. And folks usually open up, and that works. And of course, having interviewed in a bunch of tech companies on the West Coast, this is a very, very different process. It's a skill match. Do you know how to program this? When was the last time you did that? Right? Very, okay, are you checking off the boxes as opposed to, this is who we are. Are you interested in being like that?
That's really good. I guess I want to also give something tactical that you guys have used in the hiring process. Now, both Alex and Jay, I think you guys were both taken away from opportunities that you could have been spending all your time on the West Coast, and you have a job here. We have a portfolio company in Minnesota, which has a maybe even tougher time dealing with the weather, right? As a part of the recruitment strategy. And I know you guys have danced around this topic, not wanting to mention that it's cold outside, which is good. It means we're past the small talk. But our portfolio company's tactical strategy has been to do most of their heavy recruitment starting in May. And they bring people out and they put them on a boat, the land of 10,000 lakes, and they have a great time. And they just try to get them to the airport before it starts to hail or something. So I mean, that's a very tactical strategy. I wondered if any of you, especially pulling people, because we always complain about trying to hire away from a more warmer place, right? So do you have a tactical approach to really winning when it comes to pulling talent from, let's say SF?
I won't go first.
I had a candidate 3 months ago who was moving from LA and who never lived in a climate that had snow. And we were competing with a Google offer from San Francisco. This was a top concern. This was a lead data scientist on our team. And it all came to, frankly, being honest about it and not skirting around the issue, and being able to make a human connection. That is, I felt exactly the same. I was very afraid of the winter. But when making that exchange, you change your lifestyle, right? I used to drive everywhere and I'm walking to work. I used to stay in traffic for 45 minutes each way and not anymore. And I'm walking in these beautiful skyscrapers. And if you want a life that's a city life, well, with that comes something else. So the lifestyle changes a little bit, but I don't think folks care that much about that aspect as long as the alignment of values is there. If on the other hand they're a mercenary, all of the little factors start mattering much more, and you really don't want to hire them.
I haven't done it, but I will do one thing. I will take them into real estate. I will show them houses. I will show them the prices of the houses, the apartments.
Just the
But
fact that houses are
the
for sale.
square feet.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, you have a lot of time to spend inside. So let's look at the square feet. You can afford it here. That's like, you know, that's a game changer.
No, that's real. That's real. Did you have anything you wanted to share, Jay, or it's all right, we can move on.
I will just, at one point, I think what's nice actually is seasonal change. You know, we can talk climate change, and we can talk a lot of the changes that are affecting us, but that is a real thing. I mean, you know, I look at where we are and being able to go through that seasonal change. I must say, the cabin fever aspect of things, when you do get to April and then folks are outside and all of a sudden there's rooftop bars and engagement, like, that's pretty vibrant. It's pretty darn cool. And you meet a lot of folks in open conversation where I must say, you know, it is a very friendly and engaging interaction, which is very important, where in some cases, maybe in San Francisco, and I'm sorry if any other San Francisco folks that happen to be here tonight, sometimes you're not going to bump into someone and say hi and just strike up a conversation, right? So, I know that wasn't answering your question per se, but
you just made an argument that you're going to have to, the cost of living might be a little higher for wardrobe. You might have to change the wardrobe.
Yes.
Everything else is cheaper though.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so kind of switching it up a little bit, I do want to talk too about just, you know, Chicago's positioning and role when it comes to diversity and inclusion. I think there's some really interesting kind of strengths and weaknesses here. I found that we actually, as the city of Chicago, almost nearly 34% of our startups are run by women, which is more than any other U.S. city. So that's actually, I mean, it's still a third, but it's a strong point. I think that we can say, you know, there's maybe still room for improvement, but we are, you know, advanced here. However, you know, there's a new initiative called Chicago Blend, which is put on by some VC firms around town, and it measures both the diversity of VC firms and the companies that they fund, the portfolio companies, which is a big part of the tech ecosystem. Not all companies take venture capital, but a good amount of them do. And it found, so far, the VC data that it has collected, doesn't have it all in the portfolio collected, but it found that 3/4 of the industry for VCs, the people backing the companies, are male, which is even more at the executive level, and that 86% of the industry is white, which is also even more higher when you look at the executive level of these firms. So definitely the people funding the companies are, you know, not diverse, and I think, you know, there's probably room to grow. I don't have the stats on it, but for Chicago being a city where there's no race that dominates, where there's actually pretty diverse, even if it is a segregated city, I bet there's room to improve. So I want to ask you guys, now that we have some of the stats, and I know it's been on your mind already, we've talked about it, but what role does diversity and inclusion play in attracting and retaining tech talent? And maybe, what is Chicago doing right or wrong? How are we missing the mark as well? So, and maybe Veronica, I mean, I know you've mentioned this as being a passion of yours, so if you want to kick it off, and you know, we don't have to go in any order or anything, but you know, I know that this is something you have a lot to say.
I always have a lot of say. You have to shut me up. So no, but definitely this is something where yes, we're passionate about it. I'm personally passionate about the idea of like not having diversity for the part of being a checklist, like, you know, but actually because it makes business sense. And when it comes to like what I was referring before about even what developers are looking at, right? So if they're looking at and they're rating so high the company culture, right? Diversity and inclusion are pivotal, essential, and very important, not only for the minorities, but because if you live in this city, right, you are already in, you know, you are experiencing what do you like about this city. You like the diversity, you like the different experiences that you have outside in your life. So when you come to work, you actually would like to see reflected in your workspace what you like about the city outside. So it actually makes business sense to keep and attract your top talent, to create a diverse workforce that reflect what people like about the city, to actually see it in their workforce. For us, we have actually make a point about that, and we have really low turnover, and it's not because we can match like big companies type of benefits, but the type of workspace that we provide, that it's, and what we're really proud of it is about the diversity, is we're trying to reflect what people are like of outside the work, to be able to have it inside the workspace. From the point of tech talent.
What we found is that if you're hiring people just like yourself, you're just making dumb mistakes. That is, what happens is that everybody says yes, and the range of ideas that you generate is quite narrow. And as a result, your outcomes suffer. So it's just dumb. And diversity makes business sense. Because culturally for us, we found that having more ideas and trying more things is at the core of stumbling upon the thing that works. And in order to have different ideas, you need to have folks who have different backgrounds. It just makes sense. And as a result, this is a byproduct of the experimentation culture. And we were able to, as a result, through that, attract folks who have very, very different backgrounds. And that helps with trying things that I would have never thought of.
Yeah, I just playing on that. I absolutely agree that, just as Stephen will say, is like, diversity of thought and diversity of innovation. And you find so many different folks that we've run into in Uptake that have helped. You would never expect that they're in a particular role, and look at the background that they've been a part of, to really challenge the way we think about something, the way we see it. And so, I agree wholeheartedly that it has to move far greater than being check the box and say we did as a team, but be mindful of, where people have a perspective on how things work and why they work. And I'll take it to a different lens that, we get stuck in this tech world, and I think there's a lot of that in the coast, in the Silicon Valley, as an example. In the world that we operate in, we actually value reliability engineers or industrial engineers who have been there. And these are individuals who, from a diversity category, are at the upper end of their career, potentially looking to retire. And they're finding a completely new path because the skill set and the insight that they've had for the last 30 years can be tapped from a data point of view. That's extremely valuable to us. So that's just an example in one element of diversity. So I think we have to be, whether Chicago or any hub in general, is the open-mindedness to see where the ideas come from and the way we think about problems. Because I absolutely agree. Like, we have to constantly challenge that view, and our hiring process helps us. But I think we can get a lot better.
The one thing that you're mentioning in your question, the second part, so definitely from the first part, is like diversity does help. Having a diverse workforce not only makes you, have actually better growth, revenue, better, more creative. But the second part of the question was like, what can be done better? And you did talk about some stats from VCs. So one of the things that we see is like from being better is like, bigger companies understand that they have to invest in diversity, they have created programs of diversity and inclusion and things like that. However, the future, right, the startups, the newer companies, the companies that become the future, those are the ones that are not being supported. So one of the things that we said from a business sense perspective, if you're a VC, you know that a diverse workforce, more or less whatever stat you look at, is between 22 and 24% higher growth revenue than an homogeneous type of workspace. And you know that if you wait till the company grows, you're going to have to spend a lot of money to actually create diversity. So it makes a lot of more business sense from a VC perspective to support minority founders. Because from our own experience, like obviously I'm a minority, from our own experience, it's much easier to build a diverse workforce starting from a minority than if you have to actually bring it in somehow before. So from a VC and the stat that you were talking about, That's where really we need to be working on. It's supporting startups or, with minority founders.
Yeah.
I'd probably take this a little bit further, and I'd say, if you're a leader or you're a VC, ask yourself, why are you thinking about diversity? Is this because there's an external pressure on you, or because you actually yourself think that it's a good idea? If you're doing this to check the checkbox, nothing good will come out of that. But at the very least, if you don't believe it today, examine and find the facts and see if there might be something curious for you to at least try. Because we have found success in this. There's quite a bit of research on this topic. But don't do it just to check the box. It won't do anything.
Yeah. I should shut up now?
That's the last thing I want to do, so.
No, because I see it like, even from an evolution, right? So I don't know how many people are in tech, but if you look at it from the evolution of the tech industry started more from a back office type of solutions. When we were doing back office type of solutions, engineers were building the whole, the whole program, the whole product. We had a problem to solve, engineers would solve the problem. As the industry started evolving and we evolved more into customer end type of products, we needed multidisciplinary type of teams in order to even be able to produce, to solve the problem. So multidisciplinary already, it allowed to say why we need multidisciplinary teams, because we needed different specialties, we needed different types of mindsets, and we needed different approach. Diversity is the next layer of evolution, right? So now not only multidisciplinary teams, but if we are solving innovation, right, which it's about solving problems for our customers with a higher value. In that scenario, what we need is to be able to have diversity will allow us to bring the perspective that we need to innovate. So for me, it's really like the evolution of the tech industry more than,
And just one, kind of from a VC perspective here, I think that one almost obvious, but just to put this as, kind of a very clear example of the business sense for diversity and the business reason for that is if Grubhub was only made up of a team of Mark Zuckerberg, lookalikes, and that's all they targeted, that's all they knew, and that's all their customer base was, well, they would only be able to attract, I guess it's half of a third of Chicago. Because, I think about the customer base and think about the innovation that, they maybe just would have served up, leftover pizza or whatever Mark Zuckerberg ate when he was, developers, my stereotype of developers is, right? But that's not the archetype. There's a lot more to be, the people building the product, selling the product, need to be reflective of the ultimate customers, I think. And so that's an ultimate business, a very simple business case, but something that I think is pretty just raw in how we can all relate to that.
Most definitely. I mean, being representative of the customer and the employee base is very important, but it's just more than that, right? There's so many more ways to win than through straight tech. And being a faster coder doing an all-nighter better Silicon Valley style, right? You can have deeper customer empathy. You can have more creative ideas. You can be trying crazier things from nearby fields or from other markets or completely different industries, right? And having a different crew that comes with very different mindsets allows you to try these things. To both have a deeper customer connection, but to also not compete in a singular dimension, but okay, maybe you're stronger here, where they don't even look, and win through dimensions that they aren't even thinking about.
So, kind of moving outside of talent, as you guys have helped grow your businesses in Chicago, what are some other ways that we could continue to grow and move forward? I guess it could be access to capital, access to customers, mentorship, leadership in the community, political support when needed. What are the things that Chicago maybe needs to improve outside of attracting talent?
Well, one thing I'll mention, so gatherings like this completely important, right? So if you kind of looked around the room and say, there's a lot of new faces that you've never met, there's a perfect opportunity as you start to see and learn about this different disciplines. But one thing that I've seen a Coast, not to be named, do pretty well is a lot of corporate innovation hubs or investment arms are being set up. And it's almost every week a large corporation that says, you know what, we're going to put down roots. I'm working with a very large Brazilian steel manufacturing company, and I just, saw the CEO's LinkedIn post that we're just opening up a new innovation hub in Silicon Valley this week. We're excited. So there's something there that they want to be a part of and learn. And so I've seen some things like Tyson Foods has done that recently here. I think more of that can happen. And that's a great way for large corporations to get to see the access of everyone here and what is new and coming up. So that would be one from my books that we can do better at.
The other one from the help of corporations that they can actually things like the intent, right? Put intent like in suppliers. Right, so make a point of having a supplier network that actually supports SMBs. Like Google in 2014 they started the supplier diversity program to actually make a point of having in their suppliers network being small companies, so companies under 15 million, less than 50 employees. So companies that they would have normally not have the visibility. Being able to be part of the supplier. So larger corporations can do looking at the supplier network and have an intent in supporting smaller, small companies.
I really believe in developing the strengths and multiplying the strengths to be even stronger. And one thing that's really amazing in Chicago is we have some of the best schools in the country. And that connection has helped us a lot. Both in terms of hiring graduates and in terms of just being engaged with the professors to push the research into the applied world. But if you build on that and use that connection even more, well, that's a natural strength. And that's something that perhaps is a defining strength that we might even hold over some of the maybe more popular tech destinations. And if we expand on that, I think we'll be even further along.
Are you talking about a school to the south side that maybe helped get Grubhub off the ground and has a little bit of a I think it's in the top, tied with Y Combinator for one of the best startup accelerators is the New Venture Challenge. So that's a strength, and I think the history of Grubhub of that is pretty unique. And I think that, yeah, I definitely echo that. I was actually pulling some data off of the Wall Street Journal of where graduates go after they graduate, because there's been this at least conception that large coastal meccas, and they are attracting a slightly larger number overall of graduates than Chicago as a whole of Midwest universities. However, when we look at the universities taking the most tech talent, Chicago is at higher than them. So, as far as comp sci degrees and graduates and advanced degrees in comp science. So, I guess, have you guys seen any specific interactions with universities, whether from a recruiting standpoint, from a business development, from startup accelerators that you've been inspired by or been working with, or has been a resource for you at all?
I'll go. We work with that school on the south side quite a bit. We love getting interns from there, and we work with the professors to test all sorts of very interesting concepts, starting from pricing to loyalty, and they help us design experiments using the latest findings from academia and actually put them to the test. So we found that relationship to be extremely beneficial to both sides. And I encourage more companies to develop such connections. Those grads are top-notch.
We have not had relationships with universities and have that, but one of the things that we do, and I think it would be great if a lot of companies, company any size, any size can do this. So when we talk about universities, and when we talk about diversity, if you look at just universities, you already are filtering down, right? Because diversity that, many times minorities don't even get to universities. So one of the things that we try to do is, connect with the high schools and invite them to come to the company. The clubs, the high schools, they have clubs, and invite them to come, to visit and understand what it means, what is the process of building software. And so girls that might not get to computer science can get, exposure to all the different roles that has to do with software development. Or, kids in different parts in high school, they might not be able to afford to go to college, right? But they might be able to afford to go to code academies that can open, doors. So things that we can do better in any scale of any business, right? It's really about opening the doors to, our youth, to build, that connection about what happens in the tech industry, so we can attract, all different types of talents, not only graduates from universities, but all different types of talents.
Yeah, I would echo your points there. Through our Uptake.org arm of Uptake, we've definitely partnered with middle schools and high schools to help bring students in to get more aware about what we do. But not as a selling point for the company, but more of just the exposure to doing business and tech and leadership, confidence, go down the line on a few things. One of the things that we're going to be very active in this year, so back to the university alignment, I'm a big believer in the fact that you have to, part of being in business is also training the next workforce. And with that, you want to bring this exposure to academia, in part to help them understand what's coming as they come out of school, right? And so we can have a long discussion, debate about academia and whether it's funded properly, structured properly, and we're giving students the right education. But aside from that is how do we help?
Having an anchor in Blair would be very good. What made Seattle into Seattle is both the school and then first Microsoft and then Amazon. Having such a magnet that imports talent that afterwards gets PTSD and wants to get a job that they like is a good thing.
I would say don't worry about it. Really to the point of be proud of what's being built. Amazon, if you go back, right, they started as a small company. And look what they've become. And what you can actually be excited about is there are actually a lot of companies that are putting their second hubs here, or hubs in some ways. Salesforce is a great example, right? That's a reflection of what's happening here in this room. In my mind, nothing else than that. And they realize they have talent, they realize that there's folks here. So in my mind, it's a nice acknowledgement that they thought about it, but keep on trucking.
Okay, great. So now we're gonna open it up for Q&A. I think we have a mic to pass around. So I guess because this person's closest, really got the best seat, my backside.
Thanks. You guys kind of skirted around the idea of it a little bit, so I'm pretty curious to see how, if you do, and how you go about hiring creatively and non-traditionally, so people from different backgrounds from what you might typically expect, because it seems like from a lot of the conversations, a lot of those West Coast firms tend to hire based on pretty strict alignment with the form and function.
Sure, I'll give a live example versus process. So a colleague that I got to know was actually there before me, and I've got to know him very, very well. His background is a journalist, and spent many years as a journalist at a lot of major publications. And he's had a couple rotations, and of which one he was helping to lead part of our energy business. And then now he's leading sales operations. And so the thing that I would gather for him is you can see in someone's eye the tenacity and the ability to get things done and have discernment on how things get done. And that has afforded him a lot of opportunity and actually lining up to something he does really, really well. And he also likes to be the investigative reporter to find out how things have worked. So part of it is really looking at the individual beyond the resume. To me, the resume is interesting, but it's also very counterproductive. So I think getting to know the individual and what they're capable of, that's just one example that I've seen work really well.
Yeah, and supporting that, one of the things that we have done is like, we don't really look at what somebody has studied. We look at what they are interested in now and what they have done to support that interest. So if they have studied, whatever they have studied, they want to be a developer. Okay, great. You have been studying economist. What have you done in order to become a developer? What it is your interest and what is your effort that you have put to be able to see the. You want people that have that they're self-starters, right? That's one of the things that we looked at, people that are self-starters. So it is a matter of like saying, okay, so if you have a different interest, what do you have done to do that? So we don't focus a lot about what you have studied, but where you want to go and what you have done to support that.
We hire for values and velocity of learning. This idea that folks that like trying things and like failing and aren't afraid of failing and see that as a learning experience, they will go further as opposed to for a specific skill. And what we found is that if you interview for that, and we ask very uncomfortable questions like, when was the last time you failed? Oh my God, folks freak out. And those that are unafraid, and yeah, just a month ago, it was a total, utter disaster. I thought of something and it was completely wrong and I'm never gonna do that again. Yes, you hired. If there's an alignment in values and this insatiable passion for learning and no fear of making a mistake, that person can start as a journalist and become a head of operations.
Okay, we have another question. Let's go. You right there.
I guess I want to take it up to a macro level in terms of what we call the business climate or business environment, because obviously it affects hiring and growth. How is the state of Illinois' situation financially, which obviously we have a new governor, how is that affecting your decision making down to hiring employees? And then how is the city of Chicago helping create the right environment for businesses to grow and succeed here?
Well, I think one thing that matters in seeing some of the initiatives that the new governor is wanting to put in terms of innovation programs, right? If I get it right, P33 and some of the things that are still to be figured out around that, that's very important because that's a mechanism, as if I would decode it, is a way to drive and foster the innovation and the connective tissue across companies, and or being able to help in working with VCs and corporates to think about ways to drive new innovation. So I would say from a program perspective, things like that are very, very important, and the fact that it's being thought of at the highest levels, aside from the economic condition, is very important. So.
Only thing I'd add is I think it's less of an issue for smaller startups who are more adaptable, and if things get bad, they can move, which we don't want them to, but they're more versatile with that. But large companies, it is a factor when considering opening up large offices here, because they're moving a lot of their employees here and services start to decrease, taxes start to increase a lot for businesses or for their employees. It's not a good look. So I think that has been a consideration, and something that probably is not our strongest point, being Illinois. In the very back, in the black VC vest.
Hi, great panel, everyone. Given, and by the way, perfect description on the VC vest. given all of the comments around the importance of diversity and looking beyond the resume and going to new universities, are any of your companies using micro internships yet to provide opportunities for college kids to work on projects and to almost let them into your company and audition them, or is that something your companies aren't yet considering?
Yeah, I would say it's an opportunity for us to do more. There are instances we do have folks that are either on a kind of co-op opportunity, internships that are throughout the year. We typically will do a summer, internship cohort. But I think there's more, given that we've got students that are even here in Chicago or afar that have actually approached us. Not to name it again, a West Coast school had actually bombarded us this last week with, we've got our consulting team that would love to do these projects, right? So I think that's a great thing to further tap into and not think about it just in the summer cycle. And we're finding actually a lot of help in the data science space right now as we're going through iterations with our platform, that we're grabbing students out of university that are going to help us basically take next revs on sprints. So that's just something as a recent.
We do have an internship program, quite an extensive one. Dozens of interns, both here and in our New York office. We love interns. In fact, they get the best projects. I envy them very much. We made some of our best hires from the interns. And I think the relationship with the schools that's able to be created from this, if you're able to do it throughout the year for co-op programs, it just makes sense.
We have great, experience with the interns, and they go through the entire year, and they are part of the project. So.
All right, we have time for one more question. I think we had somebody. Yeah. Okay.
Hi, Dick Larkin with the Senior Show. Is technology just a young person's game? And more specifically, are there opportunities at your company for people who are older than 30, 40, or 50? And very specifically, how many people over the age of 50 has your company hired in the last 6 months or year?
I can't give specific numbers on hire, but we have a number of folks that are in their late 50s and early 60s. And in our case, it's what we're gravitating toward is the knowledge of how has somebody worked in a plant or a manufacturing line, because that tacit knowledge you cannot have in a book or a definition. It's codified in how they work. So what we're finding very interesting, and I've actually been working with a startup out of Boston that might help us, is how to create a subject matter expert network that is tapping individuals that are at the cusp of wanting to retire and maybe want to gig and do some work with us. But we're finding that knowledge is invaluable, absolutely.
Yeah, that definitely, I'm in my company, I'm the oldest, and it's an issue. But one of the things that we do actually always looked, and I keep, and you have statistics, right? So if you look about companies that are started by people that are older than 50, they have a much higher success rate than the startups of younger people, and there's obviously a reason for that, right? Is the knowledge, the accumulated knowledge. So I always tell in my company, I said I do things slower than you guys, but I don't need that much time, right? Because the accumulated knowledge just allows you to get things, faster. You take a step slower, but it's a bigger step. So in that sense, we haven't had the opportunity to, when we looked at, to be able to be, have people that are, older than me, which I would love to have that.
We have a bunch of folks older than 40 or 50, and if you're mainstream and you're delivering to hundreds of thousands of people every day, many of your customers are in that age category, and you need to understand them. So to me, age is just another aspect of diversity, exactly as we were talking about, and it just makes sense to have that different view, because you can represent the customer, you're going to have a very different set of ideas. and you can try them. And as such, you're going to be faster than your competitors because you have better ideas.
Well, guys, that's all we're going to have time for tonight. I think if we could give a really big thank you, round of applause.